Radel. I'm the executive director of Preservation Buffalo Niagara. And I want to say the star of the show today is going to be we call him Scholar Jakob, who comes to us for just the summer. He'll tell you all about him. It comes to just the summer from Cornell as a Rhodes Scholar. And so we call him Scholar Jakob, sort of as a joke, but he's actually a very smart young man with a bright future. And we wanted to give him an opportunity to discuss what he has learned on the Buffalo Green Book sites, which is his job this summer has been working with Preservation Buffalo Niagara on identifying the existing Green Book sites that are left. And he'll tell you all about it. I don't want to give away all of his presentation, but our goal actually started, take a step back, our goal started for many years. Preservation Buffalo Niagara has worked on the east side. Our strategic plan is asking for us to focus deeper on the east side of Buffalo. And it was actually Majority Leader Halton Pope who sent a message out. She wrote a letter that says, we want to focus more on the east side, more on Michigan Avenue. Where are the preservationists? How can we do more? And so we had a meeting with ourselves, Terry Alford, at the Michigan, who's running the ship on Michigan, and Chris Hawley, the preservation planner for the city of Buffalo. And what was discussed was how can we highlight more of the east side? And one of those main pieces was what Green Book sites are left from the 100 plus that existed in during the time of the Green Book. So because of that, we applied for a Rhodes Scholar, which we got Jakob, and it's what we're doing today is actually just presenting what we found so far. So if you're looking for like a full answer, you're not going to get it. But what we've found has been so fascinating that Ann Noble, who is from the Bar Association and a PBN board member, she said, let's get this online. I was like, you're right. Let's get this online and talk about it. So basically, in a nutshell, I'm going to allow Jakob to start the presentation. We're here for questions in the chat. Emily is here, Ann is here, Alicia we're all here in the chat. And if you have those questions, please feel free to drop them in there and we'll have Jakob answer them as he learns. But I thank you all for being here, truly. This is one of many, I think, phases of our work to deepen our knowledge on the Green Book sites. So you're not going to get every answer today, but I think it's really good to show what we've learned. Okay, Jakob, you ready? And I think he's going to do a great job, but we should say he's still kind of an intern, so we're going to give him a little grace, everyone, okay? All right, but he's a very good presenter from what Okay, let's all welcome Jakob.
All right. Hello, everybody. A little about me here. So my name is Jakob, and through Cornell's High Road Fellowship, it's through the ILR school, the Buffalo Extension, the Coal Lab, and they're over at Buff State now. I've gotten this awesome opportunity to work with PBN and kind of, do this primary research for all these Green Book sites. So that's been really cool. I'm from New York City originally, but I've, a lot of family roots in Buffalo. I've been living with my grandpa Joe all summer, and that's been a real treat. It's been nice to do this amazing, interesting work and, kind of spend that time with family too. I've really enjoyed getting out in Buffalo and all the natural spaces and festivals and historic sites this summer. That's just a little bit about me. I just want to go over the Green Book's historical significance first. Basically, the headline here is that it provided not just comfortable, not just convenient, but safe travel options for Black travelers kind of towards the end of Jim Crow. Even in the North in New York State, where you might traditionally think it was, no big deal. Maybe ostensibly it was a lot more open, a lot less discriminatory. You still had to think about that. So the Green Book is a very comprehensive list of safe businesses, nationwide. They do state by city. So the publisher originally was this guy, Victor Hugo Green, and his wife, Alma Green. Victor Hugo was a mailman in New York City. He lived in Harlem. And, just over time working in Harlem, he starts his own business where he, originally just focusing on New York City, starts to document these safe businesses. for Black customers. Um, and it is very popular very quickly. I think he starts publishing in 1936, and literally the following year, he expands it to New York State. The following year after that, it's nationwide. Um, so, this was something that was absolutely needed, even up north and even later on in the 1960s. Um, and so Buffalo businesses appear in the Green Book regularly starting in 1939. Um, and I will show how the Green Book is formatted in a second, but just because of how they collected information for this, it's a really strong foundation for kind of this follow-up research I've been doing this summer. So here's an example of how the Green Book was formatted. This is from the 1947 edition. So you can see kind of in the middle here, it starts New York State, they go alphabetically, Albany, here's Buffalo. You'll notice it's a big, long list of businesses. And so really it is comprehensive in that sense. And of this big list you see here, there's only so few left. There's so few of these businesses left, and it's really critical that we, preserve what is left and do this research. Of course, I have to bring up the Green Book movie. It's a great film. I recommend you've seen it. I recommend you watch it if you have not yet. It's a great movie to explore kind of this really critical use for the Green Book, and how it, directly led to safety and security for Black travelers during Jim Crow. Okay. So as part of my research process, I used various sources to kind of contribute to this, to my work this summer. Just for example, I used the Cultural Resource Information System, which is done by the New York State Park Service. They have really great information about sites, National Register of Historic Places status, if it's a local landmark or not. If I got lucky with some of these addresses, they would have what's called a building structure inventory form, and that assesses kind of, any interesting history about a building. It would give a date of construction, which is really helpful. And, just kind of other useful information like that. I used websites like Buffalo Architecture and History, and that documents, again, just all sorts of buildings left standing in Buffalo that are historically significant. Newspapers.com was by far the most useful single source of information I used. I certainly spent a majority of my time on there. And that was great to just plug addresses in, plug the names of these businesses in. And that often gave me very strong leads for, kind of follow-up research on these sites. And, personally, my favorite part of this was I got to play around in the archives at the Buffalo History Museum in the Erie County Public Library. I got to, pull, actually look at physical streetscapes and, kind of information like that about these sites. I also used Sanborn fire insurance maps, which, provided really interesting information on kind of how these buildings evolved over time and how these addresses changed. Okay, so here I threw together a couple examples of what this stuff looked like. On the left here, I picked one address I looked at, 265 East Utica Street, just to point out how it evolved, even from the 1930s to the 1960s. There's kind of, you could see this evolution of these properties and how they were used. So for this property, for example, it was called Crescent Hall for a long time, and that was a meeting place for fraternal orders like the International Order of Odd Fellows here. Just kind of a weird, interesting fun fact about that address. And then later on, it evolves to, Greater Hope Baptist Church, which is still in that building, moving in later on in this period. I also have an example of the, Sanborn map here, and they're really beautifully done for, for a private insurance company, I think. So I had a lot of fun looking at these. These pictures I took myself at the Buffalo History Museum. So, it was kind of a treat to see how they actually have hard copies of all this stuff still. I mean, just the cover here for volume 2, maybe only people who would work at this company would ever see this, beautiful calligraphy and artistry here. But so anyway, it was a treat to actually be able to look at this stuff as part of my research. And additionally, as part of this research, so like I said, only 16 of these Green Book sites remain standing in Buffalo. Buffalo had 120 distinct ones when the Green Book was being published. So, it's kind of a drastic, there's kind of an impetus behind preserving what is left. So as part of that effort, I put the sites that are remaining into this interactive ArcGIS map, and that'll go out on PBN's website, I guess. That'll be accessible. You can go around and interact and see which businesses were where, and these are the businesses that are still standing in Buffalo already. So our first Green Book site, this is kind of a golden goose in my eyes. It's 38 Broadway. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous building. It was originally built in 1875. It mostly saw commercial use throughout its history, but in the Green Book, it was listed as a site called the Claridge Hotel. That was from 1947 to 1967. So that's kind of that captures a majority of the Green Book's history, which makes this especially interesting to look at. There were pretty thorough renovations done in the mid 2000s. So as you can see from this picture, which I took, just a couple weeks ago, the exterior is really in great condition. The building has been pretty underutilized after the Green Book period. It's kind of been in this weird cycle of on and off vacancy since starting in the 1980s. It is currently eligible to be on the National Register of Historic Places, which is great. It's a great indicator that this can be preserved easily in the future. And another kind of interesting thing to know about this building is it features pretty prominently in a Charles Birchfield painting. It was called Rainy Night. So here it is. It's a really beautiful painting. If you don't know who Charles Birchfield is, he was a very famous artist from the early 20th century, mid 20th century. He lived and worked in Buffalo for most of his life, though. So I know like Buffalo State has a great exhibit about his work, and it's still, you can still find it in museums and art galleries nationwide. So yeah, so it's cool to see this building attached to such a famous artist. Okay. So next is 165 Broadway. This is part of the Dellenbaugh block. So this whole building here, or this whole block here, excuse me, is a commercial row. And so the Dellenbaugh block made it onto the National Register of Historic Places, which is very interesting. This is kind of a unique status as far as the Green Book sites that remain. It was listed in the Green Book. The Green Book as Gerald's, which is just a restaurant. It was listed from 1962 to 67. The original owner at this time was Carmen Finaldi, and he operated the restaurant for a long time, almost 40 years. And his son Gerald took over for the rest of the time that it was a Green Book site. So those are the owners that just putting names to this business that was in the Green Book. An interesting thing I found about this address was prior to being a restaurant, it was home to a local Socialist Party branch right up to the First World War when the Red Scare started. It's kind of an interesting fact about how this building was used. It's currently vacant, though it benefits from these protections. And you can see below here, I pulled a little advertisement. This would be, from the late 50s, early 60s. And you'd see, this kind of ad, this kind of format appear pretty regularly for, restaurants and bars and that kind of thing. So there it is, Gerald's Restaurant, air conditioned for your comfort. It's kind of kind of fun already. Next, we have 349 Broadway. This is really cool, and this building has a bright future. It's getting actively renovated by this one, Ramona Griffin, who PBN has done work with in the past. So it's been listed in the Green Book as the Cotton Club, it was called, just from 1947 to 1949. It had a short career being listed. It was a hub of union activity for a really long period of time. So it makes it really, attaches a lot of Buffalo's labor history to this building, in addition to it being a Green Book site. Unions, basically any industry, I found probably a dozen distinct unions that would use this area. They would gather here to, coordinate strike activity, negotiate, less intense things like fundraising here. So yeah, the building is currently vacant, but it's getting renovated. I attached an article about kind of the work Ramona Griffin is doing and her vision for this building. And if you look her up, or if you look this address up, you can see that for yourself. And the building is currently not eligible to be on the National Register of Historic Places because the interior is so substantially modified from its original state that it's just you have a ship of Theseus situation, right? It's just too different from what it was when it was in this historically significant period. Below here, I talked about building structure inventory forms earlier, and that was off the CRIS program by the National Park Service. Below here, I had trouble placing an exact date for this below image here, but I think it's about from the 1950s. And as you can see, the buildings are in the same, same kind of state. They're very familiar. The exteriors are mostly unchanged. So it's cool to see. It's cool to actually place it in the same state so far back in history here. Um, Ready? Next, I have 419 Broadway here. Um, this was built in 1934. It was a service station for Washington Iron Works, and it was later attached to the Buffalo Forge plant. This is a fun building. Below here, I found the building's birth certificate, if you will. I had trouble finding that for most of these sites. But here, I can exactly place that in 1934, Washington Iron Works constructed this brick service station, um, right at this location. So that was very special, and it's cool to, place it exactly at that point in time. So it's listed in the Green Book as JB's Golf, which is a, service gas station. Pratt Auto Sales is the business that's currently in the building, which is otherwise in good condition. And as far as eligibility information, it's undetermined, which just means nobody's, that first step hasn't been taken yet to assess its eligibility. Okay. Next, I have 108 William here. It was listed in the Green Book as L. Frost from 1963 to 67. Prior to it being a Green Book site, it was home to a rooming house, a grocery store, at which point, a service station was constructed, and then that's kind of, here we are today. It still is the same kind of business. And there's a Sunrise Market in there now. And this ad I pulled from the early 1960s here, Christmas wishes, New Year's wishes from this business. So, and the eligibility for this site is currently undetermined. Okay, I have 120 William here. Is next. It's right next door to 108, and it was listed in the Green Book as Burns, which is a garage from 1947 to 1950. Jerry Burns was the owner, hence the name. So I was able to place that for this business. And prior to this being on the Green Book, there were just a number of other gas stations and body shops and that kind of thing. But 120 William, this address is currently eligible to be on the National Register, which is very interesting. Basically, immediately after this was listed as a Green Book site, Police Precinct number 4 was built here, and it was operated there for a couple years. But that gives it eligibility, which is great as far as preserving this building. And currently, it's vacant. I know there's this, you kind of see the sign there. It says WNY Properties, but they went bankrupt before COVID, if I remember my research right. And so there's just been, this building has been underutilized and vacant since 2019. Okay. Next here, I have 348 William. This was listed in the Green Book as Arnold's for just 1 year in 1947. But before that, there were a string of restaurants that were operating in this building, and throughout the 20th century. The Buffalo Inquirer had a branch office here around 1900, which is interesting, but is currently vacant. You can see the exterior looks like it's in good condition. It just needs a little love. It needs somebody to actually be back in there. And it is currently undetermined as far as eligibility. Okay. Next, I have 360 William here. This was listed in the Green Book as Perry's Snack Bar, which is a malt shop restaurant. It's funny to see these kinds of businesses pop up in newspapers. They will advertise differently depending. I'd find it as a cafe or a snack bar or a restaurant or something like that. The owner here was Viola Perry, who, when this was listed as a Green Book site. And so, there's a deli here today, the pass-through deli, which operates out of the building. It's in great condition. You can tell like people are in there. There's a business in there, so it's taken care of. And eligibility for the register, the National Register, is currently undetermined. You can see here I pulled an ad for Perry's Snack Bar, and you would have seen, again, ads like this appear pretty regularly throughout the 50s and 60s for these businesses. Okay, next I have 416 William here, 416. This is listed in the Green Book as Joe's, which is a restaurant listed from 47 to 55. It was home to a Balser's restaurant, so just a string of restaurants and bars from the 1930s to the 40s. The owner, while this was a Green Book site, was an Abraham Levinsky. So I was able to place, an owner for this address here. The 416 bar, as you can see there, is open, currently operates at that address. And so, the exterior is in good condition. The building is in good shape. It's getting used. And I couldn't find any eligibility info available, not even an undetermined. So when we're talking like future next steps for what this research contributes to, it'd be stuff like that, discerning eligibility. Okay. I apologize for my photography here. The cars are a little obstructive. So this was listed 530 William here. It was listed in the Green Book as Edwards, which is a beauty parlor from 1947 and 1955. 55, excuse me. The owner was a woman named Callie Edwards at this time. And there was a jeweler, a doctor's office, kind of operated out of this building immediately prior to it being a Green Book site. It's currently home to a bodega, the Easy Pass Food Mart. It's in pretty good shape. And again, like with a lot of these addresses, the National Register eligibility is currently undetermined. Okay. Next, I have 582 William here. This mostly saw residential use throughout its existence, so that's why it's interesting to see that it was listed in the Green Book as Mother Deer's Barbecue, this barbecue restaurant. A couple owned and operated this. It was Melanie Christian and her husband Carl. While it was listed as a Green Book site. And the building looks like it's in good shape. It just needs to be cleaned up. Somebody needs to get in there and open a business. But it's currently vacant. Although it is in good condition. There's no eligibility info available for this site either. Okay. I mentioned 264 East Utica earlier for its interesting history as a meeting place, a gathering hall. But this was listed in the Green Book as the S&L Grill. So it was a restaurant in this building we're looking at from 1962 to 1967. Greater Hope Baptist is there currently and has been there since 1959. And prior to them moving into this building, it was previously known as the Crescent Lodge. And so, as I mentioned earlier, a variety of organizations use it as a kind of gathering place. I could place organized labor there in the 40s, as late as the 40s. So found a lot of kind of record of the American Federation of Labor using this as a space for union activity, which is interesting. And as I mentioned, the International Order of Odd Fellows, which are kind of like Freemasons, use the building as a gathering place, and they're a odd fraternal order, and they have roots in 18th century England. They're still around today. They're like a service organization. So it's just interesting that they regularly use this place to meet for, immediately prior to it being a Green Book site. The National Register eligibility for this site is currently undetermined. Okay, next I have 317 Glenwood Ave. Some of you might know this is a Pixie's Grill. And it was listed in the Green Book as a restaurant from 63 to 67. There were a number of other restaurants kind of leading up to Pixie's opening up here. And the owner was a guy named Sigmund Cohn during its time as a Green Book site. It's currently closed, but I don't know if anybody knows about what's going on with this building, but there's a guy, Kenneth Ivey, who's actively renovating it. And he plans to reopen it, for what it was originally used as a bar, a music venue. And I found articles where Kenneth talks about wanting to put a Rick James museum in here. And so I linked that article as well. Its National Register eligibility is currently undetermined. Okay, next I have 413 Swan. This is listed in the Green Book as Swan. It was a liquor store from 1947 to 55. It was owned by a guy named Michael Borgese when it was listed as a Green Book site. And prior to Swan operating at this address, there was a billiards hall and a bar, that kind of thing. In the decade prior. And it's currently home to a Puerto Rican deli, Monty's Grocery. And the building's in great shape. It's a beautiful brick building. And there's no eligibility information currently available for the National Register for this address. Okay, next we have 560 Spring. This is listed in the Green Book as Jesse's, which is a beauty salon. This is from 1947 to 1955. Jesse L. Davis was the owner at that time when it was listed on the Green Book. And I couldn't make this connection. I didn't want to assume. It sounds silly, but there was a restaurant here immediately afterwards called Eddie and Jesse's Barbecue. So I wonder if they just, flipped the beauty salon thing and turned this into a restaurant right after. And eligibility for this address is currently undetermined. Okay, next and final Green Book site, I think, is 685 Clinton. This was listed in the Green Book as Klein's, which is a service gas station in 1947. So just for the 1 year. There's a grocery at this site as late as 1930, after which it was followed by a couple of different gas stations. So Klein is just in that lineage there for this address. And according to city directory information, this has been totally vacant since the 60s and 70s. So this building you see here is, nobody's been in there. There hasn't been any businesses in there, so it's underutilized. And eligibility for the National Register for this address is currently undetermined. Okay. And I know we were doing, this project is mainly about Buffalo's Green Book sites, but as a supplement to this summer's, the research I did for PBN this summer, I also put together, for the first time for PBN, I put together Niagara Falls Green Book sites. So I differentiated by the city of Niagara Falls and Niagara County for the first time. And this opens the door for, again, big steps in the future, more extensive surveil, more research, kind of having all these addresses and business names in the same place for the first time. From my assessment, this is very tentative. Of the 37 distinct Green Book sites that were in Niagara Falls, there are about 5 still standing. And there's the same kind of impetus to, preserve these sites and, again, get businesses back in here. I just want to say, not to get too off track, but Niagara Falls has an especially unique, long-lasting Black history. It stretches back to the Underground Railroad. It was often the final stop on the Underground Railroad, being right across the river from Canada. This is part of, just my High Road Fellow program this summer, but I got to see the Niagara Falls Museum about the Underground Railroad and, exploring the city's role, how, there'd be this, kind of final steps. There were like underground networks to, push people seeking freedom to that, to Canada, where they would be finally free. And that's right by the Amtrak stop there, excuse me. I just wanted to shout it out. It was very interesting. It was very impactful for me to see this summer. So, yeah. It's very cool very cool research. Okay. So that's my kind of tentative look at the Green Book sites in Buffalo. Open it up to questions now if you guys have anything to talk about. Yeah, shoot.
We did have one question here from Nancy Cook.
Yep.
Who asked, which of these sites surprised you most about the use of location?
About the use of location, I will go back to it for you. Just a sec. We'll find the picture. So honestly, 349 Broadway was kind of surprising for me, just given this long labor history, and that's really interesting. And, especially now in this, national moment we're in, where it's kind of a lot more attention paid to organized labor again. It was super interesting to see not only the dense union history here in this address, but just for how regular it was happening and for how long it lasted for. I mean, I could find newspaper clippings consistently from starting the 1880s to the 1940s for this being, used as a union hall, basically. So that was really interesting. And I think that is a really interesting part of this building's history. And yeah, to answer your question, that, that was surprising to me that a building saw that use.
Okay, we have another question from Jennifer Wilkowski.
Well, can you mute yours?
Oops.
Sorry for the feedback, everyone. Okay, so Jennifer just suggests that we would double check the existing buildings were contemporary to Green Book area. It is possible that older buildings were demolished and new buildings were constructed. Jacob, were you able to follow, how late were you able to follow those Sanborn maps and those city directories? Do you feel that you were able to get comprehensive dates?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question because, that was definitely a bottleneck for a period. So as far as the Sanborn fire insurance maps, they stopped publishing those around the 1970s. And so the example I put in kind of earlier in the presentation, that was kind of the last big addition they did. And so it was hard to track especially later on, like you're saying, post Green Book, how some of these sites evolved. So as far as what I did to kind of address that concern, I would, double check with, like newspapers.com, that kind of thing, the city directory. Just making sure I could cross-reference, have some kind of thing to cover where the Sanborn stops. And yeah, and I appreciate the point about, the older buildings being demolished. Like, that is entirely possible. I only thoroughly covered it for the Green Book period, the 30s to the 60s. So I can place exactly what was going on at that period. But to your point, there's a non-zero chance that, something slipped through just because of the shortcoming of the Sanborn maps. And I appreciate the note about the digital Sanborns on microfilm from the early 80s. So I actually, I appreciate that. Yeah. So that would be maybe future research. Someone can cover that in the future where I did not. Admittedly, with a lot of this content, just because there were 16 sites to cover, I mostly stuck to digital. Just to give an example, like newspapers.com, for example, you can drop a keyword in for the name of the business or the address, and it will give that back to you. And that was still, just for one given address, that could be hundreds and hundreds of newspaper articles. Versus if you went to the public library, you're just, when you're thumbing through pages going cover to cover, you could, spend days trying to look for one thing. So merely that would be probably something to be addressed in the future. And this was a preliminary work, and I hope if there was something that did not come up for me, it gets caught. But absolutely, I appreciate the point about the kind of analog stuff being out there.
Great, thanks, Jacob. Patricia Graves has her hand up, so I'm going to unmute you, Patricia, or ask you to unmute, and you can feel free to ask your question.
Hi, I'm actually from Jamestown, New York, and we have similar, where we're focusing on the history of the African American community here, and discovered some of our Green Book locations. And I was just curious, I know that you mentioned that you are in the initial kind of research phases, but I was curious what the long-term plans were. Like, are you guys planning like a walking tour? Are you adding these to a site? Like, how do you guys plan on presenting this to the community? Just trying to get some ideas here.
So that is a great question. So this Jacob's initial research, that is phase one of a multi-phase process that we hope for the Green Book sites in Buffalo. Some of our biggest inspirations, I think, have actually been coming out of Virginia, who is doing an extraordinary job of representing their Green Book sites. And that's giving them designated plaques and making sure that the history is accessible to everybody. So in my hopes, and I believe all of our hopes at PBN, we would love to see our Green Book sites completely recognized, especially with plaques and dedication and available research. But we're a small bit of ways away from there. So with this phase one that Jacob has completed, thank you so much, Jacob. You have been wonderful to work with. That for phase two, we can start diving into a lot more research. And I'm sure you picked up a lot of things are undetermined on the register, National Register of Historic Places, or they're eligible, but they haven't taken further. Or, and I know most of these do not have local landmark status. So we would likely hope in the next round or two of things is to start landmarking these, the last few remaining sites we have left, so we can ensure that they're here for the future. But stay tuned, and we will be putting, this video will be on YouTube and on our website, and we will be putting Jacob's map and research that he had, the preliminary research, onto our website shortly, probably within the week. We'll get that up on the website. Let's see, I feel like we had a few more questions. Actually, Jacob, I would like to throw this question to you from Brianna. I know we're looking to Virginia quite a bit, but do you have any thoughts on how to memorialize or celebrate these sites given the locations and there's so few standing?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as just physically putting the history there. I think Virginia sets a great example. So they had kind of a similar thing that I did this summer, in a preliminary way. But they did an ArcGIS map. They documented all their Green Book sites, but eventually they actually put commemorative signage, and this is something the Park Service can do. But I think actually just putting the time and place at these buildings would be great. And yeah, as far as I guess as a best case scenario, you get businesses back in. A lot of these buildings, as you guys saw, are vacant. So I think part of celebrating the history of these buildings is to make sure they're used and as community spaces as they were. Actually, it's great we're on 349 Broadway because this is a great example of how to do this, do that kind of thing. Ramona Griffin is renovating this to be a community space like it was. So I think, yeah, just actively engaging with the buildings and putting them back in the hands of the community, making sure the community gets use out of them. I think that is the biggest credit to the history these sites have.
Great. So we have another question coming in from Terry. Were there any references to a Little Harlem restaurant and the Michigan Street YMCA or Dan Montgomery's restaurant?
Yeah. I guess as far as what I had seen, I was going off it's going off just what the Green Book had compiled. And, I guess as far as what I had understood this summer about their process, they'd almost crowdsourced this information. I mean, Victor Hugo Green was, an entrepreneur. He was a mailman before he had this big travel business where he was publishing, 10 to 15,000 copies a year of the Green Book. And so my understanding is the way they, sourced that information was they would just have people write to them. So, it's comprehensive in the sense that you have stuff for every single city eventually in every single state. But I, could totally imagine a situation where that stuff just, nobody ever wrote to them, it could be as simple as that. So, it's not to say the Green Book like totally 100% captures, kind of the Black history of East Buffalo at this time. But yeah, I guess my answer would just be like, from what I saw, that those sites kind of slipped through.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And Jennifer Wolkowski, I don't know if everybody can see it in the chat. She dropped a link for Black-owned businesses. And this looks like in Buffalo through the Buffalo History Museum Research Library. And this looks like a pretty comprehensive list. So I think if you guys are looking for specific sites, you might be able to find them through here. It is a very extensive list of different sites, whether it was restaurants or breweries or banks, Campfire Girls Club. So there was clubs in there. That is a really, really wonderful resource. Jennifer, thank you so much for that. We can look through that. So there was another really good question, Jacob, which was, I'm sorry, guys, I'm scrolling as fast as I can. Hold on. Okay, so Maxine had asked that she wonders if each state's historical society or similar would be willing to host a similar Zoom to educate their communities. Oh, sorry, that wasn't the one. There was another one of how to... I'm missing this question. I'm sorry, everybody. How do you get started? Oh yeah. Where can I begin to look? This was through Dillard, Mr. Dillard or Miss Dillard. So their family went to a Black-owned hotel in Ocean City, New Jersey in 1965. They wonder today who owned it and what street it was on. Where can they begin to look?
Well, the way I would have gone about looking for that is newspapers.com is a great website. I know it costs a little bit of money because it's run through Ancestry DNA, if you guys are familiar with that company. And that was, again, by far the most useful single resource I used to do my research on these sites. Yeah, this is kind of the most like preeminent answer in my mind because you can literally just drop the name of the hotel in. You can literally do, put the year in, put 1965, Ocean City, New Jersey. And if something's there, you'll find it there. So yeah, that would be first thing that comes to mind as far as looking at that yourself.
Okay, this is Sharon Holly.
Okay, and I think we look pretty caught up on questions. Does anybody have any last minute things? You can raise hands, you can put it in the chat, anything else?
Okay,
Thank you so much, Jacob. This research really does help us begin to dive deeper into the Green Book sites and start representing, celebrating these very underrepresented areas in the city. Let's see, just taking a look,
Emily,
checking our questions.
Sorry, Bernice, I think Sharon
Emily,
Holly had a question.
Yeah, Sharon, there you go. Yeah, Sharon Holly has a question.
I think we have most of them answered. Okay, so.
Emily, Sharon has a question. I'm sorry, you're just kind of, I think you guys are missing
Alrighty.
each other, Sharon.
Yeah, it actually was
Just-
a comment because I'm looking at the 1963
Okay,
to 64 Green
Well, I
Book.
really appreciate all of you coming to see my work today, letting me yap about my research a little bit. I appreciate all of your time, and I want to thank the Bar Association of Erie County for joining us for this event. Oops. Okay. I want to thank everyone for joining us at PBN today. If you signed up, thank you for signing up for the webinar. I'm really glad everybody has this interest in celebrating and preserving history in Buffalo. There is a QR code to donate if you would like, if you were moved by what you saw here today. Every contribution